Welcome back to Newsmax Prime. The Supreme Court recently decided to forego hearing an appeal from a pro-life pharmacist being forced to sell the so-called morning after abortion pill. And this is raising red flags about the state of religious freedom in our nation. Justice Samuel Alito weighed in on the High Court's refusal to hear the case, writing, quote, "If this is a sign of how religious liberty claims will be treated in the years ahead, those who value religious freedom have great cause for concern." For more on this, let's welcome in the former speechwriter to Secretary of State George Shultz. She's Mary Eberstadt, and she is the author of a new book entitled "It's Dangerous to Believe: Religious Freedom and Its Enemies." Mary, welcome to Newsmax Prime. We appreciate your time tonight. And obviously, this is all interrelated, but since we cited the Supreme Court's refusal to hear this particular case, how do you believe this affects our religious liberty?
Well, I think this case is just the latest in a series of blows that have been delivered to religious believers in this country, starting with at least 10 years ago when the new atheism set a new low standard for what could and couldn't be said of people's most cherished beliefs. And following that rhetorical debasement of Christians in the public square, there have been a number of other adverse turns in this new intolerance. And it's in the courts, but it's beyond the courts. There are attacks on Christian charities that are ideologically driven. There are attacks on Christian education. And there are also, of course, individual anecdotes and stories of people losing their jobs or otherwise paying unexpected penalties for religious belief, just for their beliefs. So this is really civilizational change, JD, and what I'm trying to do is first call attention to it and hold the record up to the modern day inquisitors out there who seem to want to drive Christianity especially out of the public square, and to ask them how this fits with their supposed tolerance and their love for diversity.
And that is something I want to pursue, because I have heard from some pastors saying that basically the culture wars have been lost by Christian believers, that the page has turned, that the way our society is changing, there is a marked hostility toward religious beliefs, but especially Christianity. Now, not too long ago, you had a spectacle where the mayor of Houston demanded that pastors turn over their sermons to her office for inspection. And yet the Christian community arose in righteous indignation and put the stop to that. Is that the silver lining in the cloud, or is there such an inexorable push to silence Christian views in the public square, to say to those who believe it's okay on your church grounds, but don't you dare bring it into the rest of society? Where do you think we are in this so-called battle against faith?
Well, I think there is a lot of room for pushback. The example of the pastors in Houston is one great example of where believers themselves and their allies can stand up and say, this is unjust. This is not the American way. And I think believers could do more of that. There's been a certain amount of self-censorship, and admittedly the intimidation out there can be pretty fierce. But I think we need to get off defense and onto some kind of moral offense, because we have a lot of ammunition that we are not using in this contest. Again, the attacks on Christian charities especially set an incredibly low bar for what is permissible in this society. In what other realm are people allowed to wake up in the morning and say, I know I'm going to spend my day closing an adoption agency or shutting down a crisis pregnancy center? If this were anything but an attack on Christianity, everybody else in society would say, hey, you can't do that. That's mean. You're hurting poor people. So I think we can make that kind of argument civilly and tolerantly, and I think we can run with that for a long way. It's also the case that people on the left are not a monolith. There are runaway activists who are doing lots of bad things. They're keeping enemies of supposed hate groups and haters and vilifying people out there in public and lots of other stuff. Not everybody on the left agrees with them, and I think at this moment things have gone so far, we need the people who don't want to go down that road to stand up and say, you know what, I'd rather be tolerant and inclusive, including of Christians, than I would like to go on a witch hunt.
In your book, you talk about a moral panic that is going on in the country. Is this dynamic between Christians and the new believers in secularism, is that part of the moral panic?
Yes, absolutely. And again, I think, there are reasonable people outside religious circles or traditionalist circles who probably haven't given much thought to this. And I hope they really do weigh the record of what is happening to believers in this society. Because in many ways, our situation resembles the moral panic of Salem, Massachusetts during the witch hunts, the much more recent hysteria over daycare, if you remember that, JD, in the 1980s, when some people went to jail for what turned out to be unjust accusations. Societies are always prone to this kind of collective wrongdoing, and right now we're seeing something new on the scene, which is a secularist-driven collective panic over religion. One example, people today are called bigots and haters with no evidence that they are bigoted or hate anything. These labels have become ways to shut believers out of public conversation and to say they don't deserve a place at the table. That is evidence not of reason, but of collective moral panic. It's like pointing to someone and screaming, "You're a witch," or "You're a wizard." "You're a witch because I say so." "You're a wizard because I say so." "You're a hater because I say so." And I think it's fair to call out the irrationalism of this anti-Christian animus.
Mary, I hear that and I think of, I guess it was the words of Solomon in Holy Scripture, there is really nothing new under the sun, and that includes attacks on spirituality. Mary Eberstadt, we thank you for delineating what is happening in the public square. The name of the new book, once again, It's Dangerous to Believe, Religious Freedoms and Its Enemies. As we head into the 4th of July holiday weekend, it is altogether appropriate to focus on patriotism. As part of our Let Freedom Ring series, we bring you a special look at the Declaration of Independence with Callista Gingrich.
In the summer of 1776, as the American Revolution intensified, a small group of men were tasked with drafting a political statement that would sever all ties with England and declare independence. The group included John Adams, Benjamin Franklin, and a 33-year-old Virginian named Thomas Jefferson. Jefferson, the youngest member of the Second Continental Congress, was not known as a great speaker, but what Jefferson could do was write. Jefferson rented a room in Philadelphia, not far from the building we know today as Independence Hall. Each day, he rose at dawn, made tea, and began to draft one of the most important documents in our nation's history. Jefferson reflected on ideas about individual rights and the relationship between the people and their government. He drew inspiration from his own draft of the Virginia Constitution, from George Mason's draft of Virginia's Declaration of Rights, and from the writings of English philosopher John Locke. The final document, the Declaration of Independence, was one of the most consequential political statements ever written. It declared, "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness." With these words, the Founding Fathers declared that our unalienable rights come from our Creator, not from a king or government. Congress approved the Declaration of Independence on July 4th, 1776. I'm Callista Gingrich, and this is Let Freedom Ring on Newsmax TV.
That'll do it for tonight. We are away from this desk tomorrow and Monday for the 4th of July, but we will be back Tuesday with another edition of Newsmax Prime. Especially this weekend. Stay brave, stay free, stay tuned.